I just saw 10 dogs running at me, fierce, you know, the dogs that sort of drip saliva, looking really like, I could see their teeth. It was like, whoa, what is going on here? And these 10 dogs were running directly at me like they were going to kill me. And I just thought, well, this is unusual. And and then as they were getting within shot, you know, like sort of getting closer, and I'm starting to see more detail, they then start to morph into sort of, you know, like the pairs become one. So it goes 5, and then 5 becomes 3, and then 3 become 1. And I realize it's not a dog, it's the dragon head. It's the dragon of Reiki. And you know how dragons can be quite dog-like?
Yeah.
And then it didn't come at me, it came past me, went past me this way. And then I just like, then I realized, this is a dragon, because the long tail then started passing me. And that was when I saw the 3 Reiki masters, and they were walking.
You got to accentuate the positive. I feel good. A little bit of feel good goes a long way.
You're listening to Karen Swain, teacher of deliberate creation, accentuating the positive, showing you a way to a better life.
Accentuating the positive, it's not just fad, it's sanity. Who in their right mind would accentuate anything else?
If you feel like that's what you want to do.
Hello and welcome to another show, Accentuating the Positive with Karen Swain. Always such a blessing to be with you all again. I have a beautiful woman to introduce you to today. Her name is Janeen Lee Fae. Welcome to the show, Janeen.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
And please remember, if you're liking the shows and the conversations, to share and subscribe and press that like button and send us a comment or a message on YouTube. I've turned off all the advertising on YouTube. So I've noticed since I've done that, which was over 6 months ago, the subscribes have just plummeted, because YouTube's a business like any business, and they like to make money out of you. But if they can't, they don't share your videos as much. So it's up to you guys to share the videos and spread the love. So Janeen has a fascinating life story, which we're going to hear about today. She's one of the applicants for a speaker for the Higher Self Expo, where we're discussing where science meets spirituality. And we're going to talk about the science of Feng Shui today, right?
Absolutely. My favorite topic.
I guess that's a science.
It's an art and a science.
It's an
technically.
art and a science. Let me tell you a little bit about Janeen. Janeen Lee Fae was born connected to her spiritual awareness. Unlike many people, she didn't have a spiritual awakening per se, but instead had to learn how to integrate into this world as a human in a 3D environment. Today, she is a Feng Shui Grand Master, teacher of meditation, consultant for business and personal coach. Originally from the UK, she has called Australia home for the past 12 years. Janeen's work involves building homes for her clients using traditional Feng Shui principles for beautiful spaces with practical functionality. Early in her career in Australia, Janeen was working closely with clients who built homes in the eco village in Currumbin, which sounds fascinating. I'd like to hear more about that. Janeen contributed over $10 million to the economy using environmental energy tools and techniques, aka Feng Shui, for both building and selling houses. She works closely with her clients and their energy, often creating bespoke healings, meditations, and affirmations to support their continued growth and development of their spiritual self. She directs the chi to support them in achieving the life they dream of. For this reason, Janeen has been very quiet on social media, she says, and has been working with only a select group of clients on a referral-only basis, ensuring their confidentiality. And she says, if you knew her client list, you'd understand why. So she's hobnobbing it with the rich and famous, it sounds.
seeing how the other half live.
Yeah,
hey?
the other half. Well, you've had a corporate career. I suspect that was in the UK, was it? Or was it in...
Yes. Yeah, in the UK.
Working for Microsoft. And you'll be speaking about... I haven't finished that. Today, Janeen has been guided to publish her work in the area of Feng Shui and talk more publicly about this fascinating art and science and how it can help us in any environment. And you're going to be talking about the environmental energy at home and at work for the Higher Self Expo.
That's right.
All righty, let's go back to the beginning, darling. You say that you were born awake.
Yes.
What did that look like when you were little?
Well, it was perfectly normal, of course. Yeah. I thought everybody was that way. It wasn't until my sister, who's 3 years older than myself, it was discovered at school that she needed eyeglasses. And so we had to go to the opticians, and that was the first time as a family, or my mother and my sister and I actually discussed, what do you see? And that was the first time I realized at 6 that, you don't see what I see. You're not seeing the world how I'm seeing the world. I've built this whole world and it's totally different from your view. And what that did, of course, in a 6-year-old child living in a very 3D family in a suburb in London, what that did, of course, was completely introvert me. So I became extremely shy, extremely introverted, and quite fearful to talk about what I could see, feel, hear, and experience. But my gifts were extremely strong, sometimes bordering unmanageable. And a couple of times I had situations where I actually asked, spirit, if you want to call it that, switch it off. Right now, just switch it off. Not right now, of course. It'd be very unhelpful right now. But in that moment, I wanted it to be switched off because it was too intense. When, as I think that particular incident, I was about 8 or 9, but I was able to telepathically connect to people's thoughts. And of course, my father being a hot-blooded Italian man, he had very pornographic thoughts, which weren't appropriate for a 9-year-old. So I absolutely had to switch that off because that was not for my viewing.
Wow.
So it's a blessing and a curse.
Wow.
A lot of people think, that would be amazing, but you have to see there's light and dark in all things.
I have to say that everyone I've spoken to on the show, for years, has said the same thing when they were a child, that when they had their spiritual awareness active, they wanted it to go away. I've never heard them hearing pornographic thoughts from their father, but that's incredible.
That's an adult world.
Oh, absolutely.
For an 8, 9-year-old, not really something you can
understand,
happily connect with or want to be part of your experience.
Yeah.
So I never asked them to turn the telepathy back on. That one, no, thank you. That's on my absolute no list. I believe that that's also an invasion of somebody's intimacy. And I feel that should come by invitation only.
Ooh, I have a very different view about it. I believe that telepathy enables us to clean up our thoughts and disclosure and exposure and, you can't lie and you can't have secrets. And
but energy does that too. You don't need to have a word. This was a word for word visual,
right,
as if their mind was running in my mind.
Right. Okay.
Like a computer inside a computer.
Right.
Yeah, that's how it was running. So that was that form of telepathy.
Wow.
And that to me was too much of an invasion of their personal space.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Well, yeah. Well, there are people out there teaching telepathy now. I think, that was a while ago. It's a different world that we live in. And so many kids have come in like that now. Janeen, they're like you were as a child. Yeah.
For sure. And even more so now.
And it's forcing parents to clean up their thoughts. When the child is saying, I can hear every thought you've got, they're like, oh my God, I've got to stop criticizing people and judging people and stressing, and because my kid is listening. I can't lie. Yeah. Okay. So what could you see that your family couldn't see when the doctors asked you, what can you see?
Well, I remember this was before the eye tests, but from the age of about 3 or 4, my mother would ask me to, lay the table for dinner, for example. And in the family home that I grew up in, I thought there was a lot of people that lived there because I could see all of my grandmothers on my maternal side. I could go back many, many generations. And my mother's very good at history. So she later down the track was able to help me understand which one was which based on my describing their costumes and what they wore, the fashion of that time. And because we can date our female line right the way back into the 1700s. So when she asked me to lay the table at 3 or 4, I would have to say, for how many? Because there were people all around the room and when you're a child, some grown-ups, they sort of actively wave at you and kind of want to be friends with you. And some sort of act like, oh, you don't exist, so, and I knew the ones that wanted to engage and the ones that knew I was there but didn't want to engage. And so I didn't know who was eating and who wasn't, but my mother always said, for me, you, your sister, and your father, of course, and she'd be quite sort of, why do you keep asking me this? But didn't investigate it. So that's sort of, I suppose, I guess an example of things I would see, but not just that. I would see plants very differently, like their energetic composition, and I would feel very differently going into different spaces, and every now and then, once my mother knew I was connected and realized I had come through this way, she did listen when I used to say, we need to go and visit Uncle Siddy, and she'd say, why? And I'd say, well, he's going to die. And he would 3 weeks later. and then I said, well, let's go and visit this other relative. She said, why? I was just going to die. And then I said, let's go and visit this relative. She said, why? Are they going to die? I said, oh, no, they just make really nice cakes. So that was a much childlike way of dealing with it. I suppose that would have been scary for my mother.
I know. Wow. When you talk to your mum about it, like as an adult, did she say you were like some crazy kid to bring up? I mean, it must have been difficult for her.
She always sensed my streak of independence, and she always said that she knew from very, very early on that, as all mothers say, that I was extremely special. But she very much felt, because she herself is relatively connected also,
right?
And in her own ways. And she herself, she said, I always felt you were destined for great things. I knew that you'd come here for a very specific reason. And she really could feel that very differently to my sister, who was sort of much more needy on the mother and much more stumbling her way through, where I was quite independent, quite happy to do my own things, and actually didn't want to be assisted,
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So why did you go into the corporate world? Like, what were you thinking when you grew up and you had all this ability? How much did you turn off and how much did you keep on? So you turned off the telepathy.
Only turned off telepathy. Everything else I kept.
So what does everything else entail? You can see through your physical eyes, you can see spirit, or do you see that through your third eye? Like, how are you perceiving?
Or both. So I obviously I have physical eyes that I can view the world, but I can adjust that vision so that I can see perhaps if you look at sort of augmented reality, when that's layered on top, of our actual reality, that I can sort of see an energy composition, or some people call it an aura, things like that, on top of anything that has energy. This is how I work in the Feng Shui business, of course. But also I see with my mind's eye, which is your third eye. So I very much, have sort of video, moving images, sound, like watching a movie in my inner eye, which for me feels very much downloaded. I call it downloaded when that's, I'm not creating those thoughts. I am receiving those thoughts. So and very much I feel that's what Feng Shui is really all about too. It's about the way you feel in a space. And so for me, I very much trust that solar plexus, that feeling of, or some people call it the gut instinct. When you walk into a room, you immediately know if you are loved or loathed in that space. And so I put all of that together and class that as my connection. But as a child, I was also academic and I really enjoyed school, which is what led me into the corporate world. So I found a huge level of pleasure in academia and just enjoyed learning. And I was pretty much good at all subjects bar sport. I think it's fair to say I didn't really excel at sport in any way. So my mother used to say, girls do not sweat. Girls do not perspire. And if one thinks one is about to perspire, that is one's cue to sit. So I think I really embodied that as my sister did, and we really took that into our inner soul.
I tell you what, not in Coogee. I go out for a walk and every bar, bar a couple of mothers with prams, but no, even them, pretty much every woman I see on the street is in sweatpants. they're jogging, they're pushing the pram, they're sweating, they're in sweatpants and joggers. It's like everyone's
To be fair, I owned the outfit too when I had my son in Sydney, and we had the pram and we had the outfit and we walked around Narrabeen Lake and all that sort of thing. And I wouldn't say I was being sporty. It was a different energy.
Okay, I've got to ask you. So your mother said, I knew you came, you're destined to do great things. You've come here for a reason. Did you ever ask your mob, your guides, like, what am I doing here? Why am I here on Earth? Like,
several times when you look at the way the world is and the way that the things that have happened, and not just in this year but over all the years, and particularly when I think about that, when I work with clients like that and sort of help them connect to their authentic or true self, or if they have a purpose or a mission, or defining in greater depth what that is. For me, I perceive my purpose, as you want to call it that. I'm really here in a service-based role. I'm here to assist other humans. And now that can be done in several different guises. I could be a tax accountant and I can do that. I can I could be a mum in the supermarket, queue, and have a 2-second conversation with the person in front or behind and change their life. I can do that. So it was really never a question of what job should I have. It was really just working out what I enjoy, what I feel passionate about, and really in utilizing then my gifts in those areas to assist the people that cross my path.
Absolutely makes sense. So did you ask your guides, like, where you're from?
Oh, yes, I do have a good understanding of that, better understanding the older I get. The thing that is continuously shown to me is how, we are all one. We are all connected. We all form part of a collected consciousness. And when one of us, one human, experiences pain, on some level, we all feel that pain. And we are all connected. So in terms of where I'm personally from, I feel as though, look, I read the term the other day, Skywalker, and I thought, gee, I hope I'm one of them, because that sounds so much fun, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
I hope I'm a Skywalker, jumping from planet to planet to planet.
I remember speaking to Sherry Wild, who is, she was abducted for many years. She was a really successful real estate broker in the States. And I don't know, I think she was in her 40s before she had any inkling as who she was. But she had all these abductions that she had no memory of, but she had all this lost time. And then she had a hypnosis and she met her spirit guide, who she called Da. And she remembered as a child seeing him in the crib and calling her Da, like Dad, Da, 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 Da. And he had been with her all her life. And when he appeared as a tall grey, but when she said, is this who you are? He goes, no, this is just the bodysuit that I wear in order to do what I do in the universe. And she said, well, who are you? And he said, I can't remember, but something like, I'm a soul who traverses the universe in service to the creator, something like that. I just remember listening to him describe who he is.
Another Skywalker.
Yeah, another Skywalker, even though he presented as a grey, a tall grey. He said, this is just a very efficient suit that I wear. He said, the human body's too fragile for what I do.
Oh, yes, it is.
Yeah. I just thought, that's such a great description. Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't think any one of us as a soul has an individual identity as just being one thing. I think we all experience many, many things. I think that's part of the plan.
Yeah. Do you feel like you've been to Earth many times before?
Yes, I'm glad you asked me that. I just recently took my daughter. We actually had to travel during COVID, which was pretty tricky. But we had to go on compassionate grounds. A family member was very sick, sadly. But we went back to my ancestral home. My great grandmother, Hannah, her name, was born there, had her children there, married, had her children there, died there. And her eldest daughter, she was 6 greats, so her eldest daughter was 5 great grandmothers to me, was also called Hannah. You know how it was fashionable to call your child your own? I don't know how that would have worked in the home. That would have been hectic. But Hannah, yes. Like, what? But anyway, her eldest daughter, Hannah, struggled so much with her mother's passing that she essentially moved from one side of the UK across to the other side of the UK, which started my London line, my London lineage, because she was walking the streets of a village in Gloucestershire, South Gloucestershire, called Thornbury. And she was so bereft and just in such deep grief that every time she turned a corner, she would think she would see her mother. And so she found it too difficult. So she relocated across to the other side of the country. This is back at the end of the 1700s, turning into the 1800s. My daughter and I were there walking the same streets, and it was shown to me that I had been her mother then. I was the mother Hannah, and my daughter was the daughter Hannah. And so going back there, and during COVID, when everything was in lockdown, all you could really do was walk. And so we walked the streets of this village, Thornbury, our ancestral home, and in doing so, healed an entire grief line that my daughter particularly was connected to. To answer your question, I would categorically say I know I've been here before. Yeah. And for me, I think when clients talk about deja vu moments and things like that, for me, that's representing an acknowledgement of, yes, you have been here before. There are people who are very new to the earth. I'm sorry, did that touch you?
As I tune into you and your daughter walking those lines, I just, just for what you were doing.
Yeah.
Touched me. Yep.
Yeah. Oh,
getting it.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah. Look, that's such an important job that many light weavers are doing at the moment. Healing those ancestral wounds, that ancestral grief, that ancestral.
And you know why that's important? Because we can't take it into 5D. It must
absolutely.
stay It must stay here. And that's why it's really important. So my family member who was very, very unwell, that caused me to return to the UK during COVID for 4 months on compassionate leave, they actually, they were not doing any operation. They had cancer. They were not doing any operations at all in the UK. No surgery at all because of COVID. And they opened up the theatres for 18 days in November. And my family member managed to have about 13.5 inches removed from their intestine. And they got the 100% all clear of cancer. So not only did we get to clear our ancestral grief, but this family member who gifted us the opportunity to go back and do that was then gifted 100% recovery.
Oh, that's so beautiful. Oh. I was talking to a young healer at my daughter's, had a bit of a going away gathering because she's getting on a boat again and traversing the coast of Australia, as she does every winter. And her flatmate is this beautiful Galactic starseed. He's 20, just turned 28, and he works in a hospital dealing with some of the most unbelievably dysfunctional young people. He was saying one of his clients has just cut herself, like her whole arms is just scars from where she's cut herself. Mm. And I was thinking about these, she's only 23, and so many starseeds have come in holding so much ancestral pain, and they don't know what to do with it, and they're not aware of who they are. Maybe they're still under the veil. It's amazing that you were so aware. Yeah, and so they're holding.
It's a journey. They're all on a journey.
Yeah.
So it's not one person having greater awareness than another. It's just that at that point in my journey, I was able to clear it.
Yeah.
For generations.
Generations.
Yeah.
Absolutely what you say is so true. If we're going to shift this world, we can't take that with us. There's no more, working, no more like reincarnating back into the karma to try and work it out and not working it out. And, that's done, that's finished. It's like time to move on, Groundhog Day, moving forward. Yeah. So, all right. Oh, wow. Fascinating story, Janeen. Fascinating. So you had this ability, like you had the heightened creative psychic, but you also had the heightened logical intellect. So you've sort of got both sides of your brain operating at a higher frequency. Mm-hmm. And you're able to integrate that into your corporate world, and hence had a really, successful career in the corporate world, working for Microsoft. And what brought you to Australia? Like, what drew you?
Well, I love, of course.
I always ask this to people who come from overseas, and 90% of the time they say, I fell in love with an Aussie.
Yeah, I didn't actually fall in love with an Aussie. I married an Englishman who was already in love with Australia.
Right, okay.
And it was his deepest desire to be here.
Yeah.
And he was on board with my corporate career, really understanding when I did a great deal of travel, and was supportive and encouraged me in all of those things. But as soon as I decided to become a mother, which I knew was part of my plan, and as soon as I decided to become a mother, he absolutely swooped in on the opportunity and said, let's emigrate.
Right.
Because I was never going to have the career that I had and be a mother simultaneously. I know there are many women who believe they can do and have it all, and that's absolutely true and fantastic. But I really wanted to give 100% of my energy to either the job or the career or the child in the early days. Now, of course, I have that happy balance and I have more than one child now. So, so I have that sort of happy balance of juggling. But initially I wanted to be energetically very present in that experience of becoming a mother. And so that was when my husband said, let's emigrate,
So as someone as sensitive to energy as you, both personal and environmental. What was your experience of the energy of Australia compared to where you'd come from?
It came to me before I even stepped foot here.
Right. Okay.
So I did all the proper, logical things. I went through an immigration agent. We did a lot of profiling, personality profiling as a couple, and then as a growing into a new family, as to where we should be based. And it turned out we were best suited either in Toronto or on the Gold Coast, were the two places that were identified for us as people. And I said to my husband, I think I'd rather turn on the aircon than shovel snow. And my mother's cousin lives in Toronto, and I know how bad their winters can be. And I just didn't feel that I didn't have the confidence in the driving conditions, quite frankly, where I knew that I could turn on aircon quite easily. And so I had energetically committed to, okay, Gold Coast. And my husband had said, I've heard of a place called Burleigh Heads. It's very famous for surfing. And he, of course, thought himself somewhat of a surfer. 12 years into the journey, I still think he thinks he's a surfer. I'm not entirely convinced we're committed on that course. Definitely recreational hobby, perhaps. So when you see the little Aussie boys and girls running out into that ocean, I mean, they just look so natural, don't they? They're phenomenal. And then there's him. So that's a different experience. But so energetically, we'd committed to the Gold Coast, and he'd heard of this wonderful place called Burleigh Heads and read about it. And I started to have dreams. And in the dreams, there was a map of Australia, which I must say at the time, my geography of Australia was appalling. And I could have only have described to you that at about 3 o'clock, there was a line, a horizontal line at 3 o'clock, which I now understand to be the border between Queensland and New South Wales.
Right. And
an Aboriginal man stood on this map where this line was at 3 o'clock in my dream. And he just, as stood in that sort of iconic pose of having, that half yoga, one leg up, holding the stick, with a sort of cloth over the important parts, and relatively naked. And he just stood there stationary, staring at me in my dream. And every time I was coming into an awoken state, in the morning, and I'm first gaining consciousness back, I would see this vision of this Aboriginal man standing at 3 o'clock on the line on the map. And I asked my guides about Australia because I have very strong family values and very loyal to my family, and have really struggled with emigration on that level. So feeling that sort of I have abandoned them or left them, which I now realize is not the case. I'm totally free, of course. And so when I connected with my guides, I started waking up. The Aboriginal man started doing this to me, like, come. He didn't speak. He just made this motion of come. And I opened my eyes. I phoned all the important people that mattered to me in the UK. And I said, I'm going to be going to Australia. So that was my commitment before I was. And actually, one of the first Aboriginal people that I met here in Australia, he actually said to me, if you were my son, he said to me, I would take you walkabout. And I thought, and I just looked at him and I said, I can hear your songs. And he said, I know you can hear them. And it's frustrating for me because I can't get them back out of my mouth. But if I stand on land, I can hear and feel the tracks and the energy and
the songs, the song lines.
Yeah.
I'm a bit of a mess with you, Janeen.
I'm so sorry.
I'm just feeling everything you're saying, and I just feel like bawling. No, it's not a sad cry. It's like I'm just so touched. Oh God!
Because it's energy. It's energy.
It certainly is.
This is what an energy exchange is.
Absolutely. I can't tell you how many people I have asked, what brought them to Australia. And everything that you have said would be the same story for them, but they were not aware of it. Like, they don't know why, but they were drawn here. They say, I fell in love with an Aussie. They say, oh, I came backpacking and I just had to stay. It's like the land, the Indigenous custodians of the land were calling them. And, you know, you can't say that in sort of normal conversations like the Indigenous elders were calling you, but unless you can say it, I suppose.
I totally would. And look, if the people don't connect with that I'm speaking to, then my golden rulers, they're just not of my tribe.
Yeah.
You know?
But getting back to when you feel the energy of the two different, I ask you this because years ago, there was this fabulous English guy, tiny little guy that came out here. I was running the Academy of Light and he was one of our speakers, and we put on some courses for him, and he was talking about apports, you know, things just dropping out of the sky, and he had the most incredible stories. But anyway, he did this workshop and I helped him with the workshop, and he said he was just talking about his experience of feeling the land as compared to where he had traveled around the world, and I was just hearing his experience of feeling this, you know, the energy in Australia. What was your experience?
So very, very similar, I must admit. Look, it's magic. It is pure magic. And I jokingly say to some of my international clients and friends, I call it the magical land of Oz. And as in, you know, as in the Judy Garland movie, you know, The Wizard of Oz, and spell it O-Z as opposed to A-U-S, because for me, it is a magical land. There is something magical about this soil. And I visited a fair amount now of Australia, and I've feng shuied in every state now. I haven't been to the Northern Territory or South Australia, but I've done Zoom calls for them and done feng shuis there. So on some level, I've connected with the earth there, but one day I do hope to stand upon it in the real. But there is something very magical about Australia. And I'll share a story with you that happened to me not so long ago. And it was on the portal, you know, that happened at the end of 2020 with Uluru. So I was in the village of Thornbury in South Gloucestershire in the UK, working on the ancestral things. And there was a lot of media attention coming through about Uluru. I don't pay that much attention to the news. I sort of keep one ear on it to sort of sound half normal, I guess, to the rest of the world. But then I won't go into the energy of it or the detail. I very much keep that away from myself. But I was being shown lots of news reporters in Uluru, and I was getting very much the vibration that there was a lot of unhappiness, that Uluru was sort of being plagued by media like this, swarming like flies was sort of the energy feeling I kept getting around Uluru. And then the portal happened. And I was standing in the garden and knowing the portal was opening inside of Uluru, and knowing there was very magical things that were happening there that had been planned for many, many, many years. And the energy of Uluru came down through the earth across the entire world, earth, and it was the tree roots that brought it up into the garden in which I was standing. So when I closed my eyes, I could feel Uluru and the portal being breathed on me through the trees. That is how incredible Australia is.
That's so beautiful to hear how it affected, well, someone who could feel it. But yeah, it definitely affected the world. So it was so beautiful to...
And the energy was carried in the fauna and the flora,
right,
was how the energy was carried all around the world.
Wow. You're right. There was a lot of consent. There was a lot of, there was things going on, and a lot of the Indigenous didn't like that there was so much publicity about what was happening. A friend of mine put on a conference up there. There was unrest, and they didn't want all those people there, and like all the light workers flocked there because they wanted to be a part of it. And look, there was a bit of drama that unfolded throughout that whole thing. But regardless of the 3D drama, the human drama,
but you know what I like in it
still worked.
Because nobody was wrong. There was a great deal of excitement, you know. But you know what it reminds me of, you know, when a woman is in labor. It's like Uluru was in labor, and all the family were wanting to go to the hospital and see the baby, and what's happening, and what's happening now, and all those sorts of that. So of course it's going to cause, but of course the woman in labor wants to be very undisturbed, very quiet as she goes through this very natural process. And that's where you had that sort of juxtaposition of those two energies.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Oh, beautiful to hear that. Okay, yes. This fabulous English guy, I can't even remember his name now. It was so many years ago, over 20 years ago. He was just saying that he feels a spaciousness in Australia that he's never felt anywhere else on earth. It was just interesting to hear his perspective. Just a freedom. And you think about it, there is this massive land with this tiny population. So there's not, like, if you're feeling it, you're not feeling so many consciousnesses and stressful thoughts. And, you know, there's not such a horrible history. We have horrible history, but not so much of it like the rest of the world.
The whole world has horrible history.
The whole world has horrible history.
The whole world also has some beautiful stories.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's interesting. Okay. How did you get into Feng Shui? And for people that don't understand what Feng Shui is, do you want to describe to people exactly what Feng Shui is?
Sure. So you're pronouncing it quite well. I think my English accent causes me to pronounce it Feng Shui, but it is actually technically more correct to be Feng Shui. I just don't have a Chinese accent, so I call it Feng Shui. But it is a very difficult word, and for a lot of people it is a very complicated and complex, mixed up, confusing subject. Essentially, if we were to translate it, it would be environmental energy. It's thinking about the energy in the room, in the house, in the building, in the office, in your space. We spend a lot of time working on our inner energy, creating a healthy life, living healthily, etc. But we don't really give a great deal of attention on the whole to the energy in our environment that we're breathing and living within that actually really supports us. So what Feng Shui is, it's actually an art and a science, as we said at the beginning. And it's focused on 3 schools, if you want me to get a little bit technical here. There's 3 schools of thought. So there's compass school, which looks at north, south, east, west of a compass. And that really focuses on your individual birth chart and works out the good and bad directions for you, for when you sleep. So where your crown chakra points, where the energy, your back sits behind, what is coming towards you, for example. So that's compass school, which we look at more in the bedroom and dining table, office setup, things like that. Then there's form school, which is really beautiful school. It's like imagining you're a bird above your house and you're flying around and you're looking at the environment and you're looking for all of the things that we need in life, water sources, food supplies. You know, we want to know if we're buying a house, if it's close to a main road or near a motorway or something like that, or a highway, and we want to know if there's a cemetery nearby or a rubbish dump or, you know, a landfill site or something like, you know, all these things. That's what form school looks at, the lie of the land. And then there is what is terribly translated as flying stars. Now, flying stars means planets. We just didn't quite get to the translation of planets, but a flying star looks at the actual birth chart of your building. So when it was built or last major renovations, and we take that as its birth date, and then we look up to the planets to work out where the planets were positioned at the time the building was born, And that's where we get the color palette from. So for the interior, so you should have, you know, I don't know, a higher degree of earth in this space or a higher degree of metal in this space. We look at the elementals to balance. So that would translate to being a mushroom gray or cream or something. And metal would be more of your sort of grey tones. So you might put charcoal carpet in a bedroom, for example. And so Feng Shui is about utilizing these different schools of thoughts to understand your building better, just like you'd understand your own birth chart better, and how you and all the residents fit within your building. And then you align the building and the energy, the chi that flows throughout the building to your goals, to your hopes, to your dreams, to what you're looking to achieve, what's on your list of, your vision board this year or the next decade or however long you want to look at it. And we align the energy to point in that direction to achieve that in the life. And when you walk into an environment that is well Feng Shuied, you will feel amazing. And you won't necessarily know it's been Feng Shuied, but you will feel phenomenal.
So how did you get into it? What made you think about doing it as a profession after you had this like corporate?
Oh no, it was during as well as
during.
So this year marks my 30th year of
Wow.
practicing Feng Shui.
Wow.
And so I'm 43 this year. So you don't need to do any maths here. I'll calculate it for you. And so I was 13 years of age when I was at school in my very connected little world of wonderment. And being very connected, I was very into Western astrology, and I was very busily, it was an all-girls boarding school, and I was very busily telling the girls, oh, you're a Gemini, you must marry a Capricorn, and all this. And I was really quite into the astrology and, you know, who we should all marry, and as 13-year-old girls think. And actually one of the house mistresses approached me with a book all about Feng Shui. And she said she actually had it like under a cloak because it was really cold, and it was a bit sort of, you know, it just seems like a scene out of Harry Potter when I think about it. But she sort of pulled it out of her cloak and she just gave me the book and said, "You never got it from me," because it was a very Methodist boarding school. So they let me do all my, you know, Western astrology, but this talked a lot about Eastern astrology, and it really captured my interest because firstly, I'd never heard of it or knew much about it, but we did have a big international community at the boarding school. So there were a lot of girls from China and Hong Kong, and I think Hong Kong was parting ways with China around about this time. So we had quite an influx of students come. And so I was able to talk to them about it and understand it from their cultural perspectives. And I love the fact it said I was Year of the Horse, and these are the characteristics of Year of the Horse. And I'm looking around, you know, my peer group, and I'm thinking, well, I'm not like her, and she's definitely not like me. Like, you know, so I was thinking, but we're all different. So how does this work? And it started building from there. And then basically every weekend I used to spend in a bookshop in London, a well-known store called W.H. Smith's. Many people would have heard of it. And they have a very good sort of self-development, self-help section. And I literally would park myself on the carpet as soon as the store opened, and I would leave when it shut on the weekend and read everything there was to read about Feng Shui.
Oh, beautiful. Wow. I remember I first heard about it. There was a conference here. I can't even tell you how many years ago it was. It's got to be 25 years ago. It might have been 30 years ago. I don't know. I was in my 20s, I think, called Metaphysical Mastery. And it was around the time that people in Australia were rehashing the tsunami story. So there's a story going around that there's going to be this big wave that's going to wipe out the east coast of Australia. Mm. And back in the 60s or 70s, people were moving out of the city in droves and moving up to the Blue Mountains and you know, storing cans of food. And this story has been going around for years, in the 50s even. And so it was resurfacing in the 80s and maybe 90s. I can't remember when it was. And people were again moving out. And anyway, I went to this big conference called Metaphysical Mastery. It was in what used to be the old entertainment centre in Sydney, which is no longer there. Massive entertainment centre. And I was sitting in the audience with about, I don't know, about 7,000 people. It was amazing how many people turned up to this 30 years ago. And there was this woman that was talking about Feng Shui or Feng Shui. I had never heard of it before. I was totally mesmerized. Of all the speakers that day, Louise Hay was on there, and I can't remember who else, Wayne Dyer, I think, but I can't even remember her name. She was the one that captivated me the most. But as I was sitting in this audience, I was right up the back, up the top. I was looking down at this stage, and she was like this tiny little dot on the stage. I looked at all these people that were listening to this conscious conversation, and they spoke about how they'd been to Sydney, Brisbane and Melbourne, and they'd spoken to about 20,000 people. And I thought, well, that's a tsunami, because they were all from overseas. It was a tsunami of consciousness that had hit this coast, the east coast of Australia, which was Melbourne, Brisbane, Sydney. I really got that sense that was the tsunami of consciousness, that was a wave going across the east coast of Australia at that time. I was thinking about
Australia are very because I work with, internationally, and lots of West Coast America and, Europe and South Africa and places like that. I have to say, as a continent, as a country, Australia are probably one of the most awoken, connected, and knowledgeable of Feng Shui.
Wow.
Yeah, which is always, a delight for me, because it makes my job a lot easier. But I don't know whether that's because, geographically they're closer to China and Japan, where it originated from 6,000 years ago.
Right.
Well, 6,000 years ago was its first known use. So it's first implemented. So if you imagine the way, and I think this is quite helpful to understand how Feng Shui came into our world. But essentially, if you think of sort of little martial art ninjas that were around about somewhere between the ages of about 13 and 20, and they would be given kill missions. And 6,000 years ago, that would mean a close range kill across the neck, or poison in the food or the drink or something. But these little trained martial art ninjas would actually go and live in the dynasty or the kingdom of the victim that they were going to be killing, but they would hide. And they could be there for 3 to 6 months waiting for that opportunity to catch that, the head of that dynasty or something on their own, without security or something like this, where they could make their close range kill. And they would use the 3 schools of Feng Shui that we talked about to keep them hidden and to keep them safe, and to ensure that their physical needs were met, so that they were fed and watered and could sleep and stay alive themselves. And if they were successful on their kill mission, they would then be gifted their freedom, and they would go and start their own camp or their own house with their own family, create their own family from that point. And of course, they would utilize all of the tools that kept them alive in their construction of their sort of little huts and homes and things that they did. Wow. And that was the first known recording of how Feng Shui was utilized.
Wow.
The creation date is not known on this earth at this point. Who worked all of this out? Because it's very mathematical. So
if someone tapped into the subtler realms and the history and the future, you would have been able to have a chat with some of the Feng Shui masters, I'm sure.
Yes, I think that I always think it's worth remembering that we're in the living. Okay, to be alive is to have one of the greatest gifts, from the universe, is to inhabit a physical shell and to be in existence and to be alive, or just to be. But we also pay homage to the fact that we're not here alone. We don't do this alone. It wouldn't be possible. I couldn't have gotten this far alone, for sure. So so you're definitely conscious of the fact that there are many masters and grandmasters that have insights and depths far beyond my humanness, that I think you must lean into and consider when designing a solution for your client. And they, of course, themselves, well, they'll have their own guides and guardians and, you know, angelic beings and, you know, their galactic brethren that are there to support them. I remember doing a Feng Shui for a family. I think they were on the Gold Coast, and they had just flown in from a funeral in Sydney. And literally, they had come from the airport to, I met them at their home and did the appointment. And we were looking at, around the swimming pool, they had a really big pot plant. And I mean, it was absolutely enormous. You know, I'm trying to think of dimensions to tell you, but it would have been, you would have needed, you know, some sort of machinery to lift it. And they just couldn't have element earth in that space. It was really crucifying that sector, and it was causing them a lot of difficulty. And we had to move the element earth from that space somehow. And it wasn't, because I tend to go around every room and help the family in every room and work out what is best in every room. And we were in their son's room, and he had an empty cotton reel, an empty cotton reel and a ruler just to hand on his shelf. And it popped into my mind and I'll try to do a little reenactment of it, but it popped into my tools I have here, but it popped into my mind, this empty cotton reel and this ruler. And I sort of looked at them and went like this. I said, oh, we need a lever for that pot. It all sort of flashed before my eyes, and I could understand exactly how we could move it. And the man of the house, the husband, the chap, said to me, are you by chance connected to my granddad? And I said, I'm not sure. I wasn't sure. He said, we've just come from his funeral in Sydney. I'm thinking, this is the granddad. And then he said, he was an engineer. I was like, of course he was. Yes, I'm pretty sure your granddad's here and is helping us work out how to move this pot of earth. So I couldn't do this work without, you know, our whole team of supporters in, you know,
in spirit,
in the unseen worlds. Yeah.
Well, only unseen for most, not unseen to you, but unseen for some. You know, speaking of that, I met you through David Norman, who's been on the show, is a good friend. And, you know, I was in the car one day with him when you called, and you were having a chat, and you were saying something about the Reiki masters. Do you want to talk about that, what you had seen?
Wow.
Speaking of masters in spirit.
Yeah. So I did some training in Reiki. I think I did Reiki 1, and I sort of did Reiki 2, although I'm not entirely sure I was properly initiated, or whatever the right word is there, into it. I sort of did the course. I'm not sure that the lady who trained me quite did that. Anyway, but I remember her saying to me, because she taught me Reiki 1 as well, I remember her saying to me, oh, this is really weird. You don't need attunement. You're naturally attuned, which is that I was born this way, coming into the world like this. And she was sort of almost freaked out by that a little bit, because I didn't need the attunements or something. But she taught me the chakra rays and the healing tools and the practices. And because there are times when I will do healings on clients, particularly, you know, if the chi flow is blocked in their chakratic system, I might blast that out. And Reiki would be one tool I would use to do that. But I'd gone to visit a friend of mine. Well, we'd been friends since we were 18 or more, or 18, around about 18. He'd married one of my school friends, and I'd been to visit them at their house, and he'd had terrible illness, And he, you know, I hadn't seen him for a couple of years, and he really broke down and said to me, Janeen, I nearly died. Like, he was really shaken. And I said to him, like, you didn't, you know, you didn't. I said, would you want me to do some healing on you? Well, they are probably the least likely to ever attend any of the expos that you're talking about, right? Just not their thing, but still my very dear friends. And I said, look, it may seem weird to you, but I could possibly maybe help you a little bit. So let me try at least. So he said, all right, I'm open to that. So he laid on the sofa and I went to do a chokeray. This is what I was explaining to David in the car. And it was as though I had a gun and I was not firing. I was firing, there was empty, no bullets. I shook my hand. I'm connected, like, what's going on? And I, you know, he's laying on the sofa. I said to him, can you feel anything? He said, no, not a thing. And I thought, well, I daren't say, nor can I. So I don't want to confirm his thinking anymore of his belief system. So I just was, okay, all right, that's not a tool in my tool bag I can use either for this person or right now. And so I switched to a galactic healing modality that I trained in America, and which had actually come in naturally when I was doing when I was doing the Reiki anyway. I found it to be a lot faster, and one of those sessions was the equivalent of 20 Reiki sessions, and it just really shifted what I needed it to do. It worked really easily for. And so I ended up running some galactic sort of healing energy through him, and just explained to him that if his body was a house, he hasn't been demolished. He has had a house fire, and inside he needs to do a whole redecoration. He needs a repaint throughout. And even when we contrasted the palms of our hands, you know, he was grey in comparison to my pinky peachy flesh. And so that was my experience. And I just tuned in with spirit and sort of was, what was that about? And that was when it was shown to me that Reiki is needed. The energy, the essence of Reiki, the pure energy essence of Reiki is actually required in a different earth at this point. And so, as I explained to David, Reiki has left the building. It has left the earth. It doesn't mean we're not running energy. It doesn't mean the symbols don't have significance. It doesn't mean we're still supposed to be doing healing. But that actually, that is not, was shown to me that will not be transitioning into 5D. Yeah. The actual Reiki energy itself.
I remember you said in the car that you had the vision of this dragon, this.
Oh, so the Reiki Dragon, yeah.
Yeah.
So the way, you want me to explain that?
Yeah,
the way it was shown to me was, I just closed my eyes and was sort of in a meditative state and just asking about what had happened with my good friend. And I just saw 10 dogs running at me, fierce, you know, the dogs that sort of drip saliva, looking really like, I could see their teeth. It was like, whoa, what is going on here? And these 10 dogs were running directly at me like they were going to kill me. And I just thought, well, this is unusual. And and then as they were getting within shot, you know, like sort of getting closer, and I'm starting to see more detail, they then start to morph into sort of, you know, like the pairs become one. So it goes 5, and then 5 becomes 3, and then 3 become 1. And I realize it's not a dog, it's the dragon head. It's the dragon of Reiki. And you know how dragons can be quite dog-like?
Yeah.
And then it didn't come at me. It came past me, went past me this way. And you know how dogs, even when they're being aggressive, whatever, they can sort of look back at you with you see the whites of their eyes and their tongues are hanging out and they look a bit dopey and silly.
Yeah.
And the dragon sort of looked back at me in my meditation as if to say, it's me, silly. Like, why were you frightened? It's me, you know, like, and I, you know, we know each other sort of thing. And then I just like, then I realized, this is a dragon, because the long tail then started passing me. And that was when I saw the 3 Reiki masters, and they were walking not towards me. They didn't look me in the eye. They were just walking past my vision. And I just watched them go, and I could see the sort of the back of their head and their cloaks and the back of their feet, the sole of their feet, and their little sandal, like you could sort of see walking past. And that was when a voice in my head just said, Reiki is required elsewhere now.
Reiki has left the building. Well, this is going to upset a lot of people who practice Reiki, because Reiki has become such a huge industry, especially amongst
and it's still taking off.
Newly awakened,
Yeah.
People. It seems to be a path of initiation for many people who start to become aware of who they are as intuitive, psychic, and now they're feeling energy. And now, like, what do they do with it? They go to a Reiki course and they like start feeling it in their hands and tuning into it. And there are so many people that make a living from teaching.
Oh, and this is meant in no disrespect to them. This is what was shown to me. This is part of my story, what I needed to understand at that point.
Yeah.
And in sharing it, what I would say is that, when you're running energy, how much of it is pure Reiki from those masters?
Right.
How much of it is energy?
Exactly.
How much of it is
frequency?
Divine energy?
Yeah. Because
what I understand, I would still do the sessions, still do the Reiki, still do the symbols. I'm not even a Reiki master.
Right.
So, but for me, this is a really good example of energy, because really good energy is like that, that rolling moss gathers no stones, and it picks up pace.
Right.
So Reiki will still be rolling in our systems for a long time because of its significance and its impact and what it has already given us. And all that's left the building are the ancient masters that originally brought that frequency in
to earth. Yeah.
What they've gifted us is the ability to heal, to use symbols in healing, to run energy through. So if you're about to attend a Reiki course, still go, because you'll learn to set up a healing, to learn how to place your hands on a person.
And I really believe that what most people are teaching when they call it Reiki is probably not exactly Reiki. It's more like they've been initiated through Reiki, and they've probably been taught to be Reiki practitioners and masters, but they've started to tap into their own connection and their own galactic frequencies. And, and they're just calling it Reiki. I have to say, I did Reiki so many years ago. It was like one of the first things I did. I was studying as a naturopath. And like, I'm in my early 20s, and I did a Reiki course. It was my first, and I did all the initiations. Never, ever did I ever use the symbols ever. I just had an intuitive knowing that I could do this. Like, it fascinated me, because I felt like when we're starting this journey, we think we don't know this stuff. And so we're like, oh my God, I don't know any of this stuff. But I think we all innately know all of it. Our soul has access to it. And once you learn it, there's this remembering that you already know it, and so much more. And I think I just tapped into that. And started. I never ever brought up the symbol. I think I couldn't even remember them. So it was just like, I just put my hands on people, and what would come through would come through.
Right.
But
and that's the difference. That's so I'm not saying that sort of energy healing is it has left the building.
Yeah.
It's just that there are other
frequencies available.
Right. Well, there are other universes where Reiki needs to come in.
Right.
And that's what they've left to do, because they've already brought it in here.
Yeah, right.
And when I tune in and I ask about, okay, well, within energy healing, and that's not my principal modality, but within energy healing, what is the future of energy healing? And they show me there are thousands of modalities of energy, specific energy healing, like Reiki, or like light wave that I've trained in, and others. There are thousands that you can take. Just as we tap into different guides and different angelic realms, and equally that exists within healing too.
Yeah.
And as we become more consciously aware of where the energy is coming from, we'll understand why it's okay to move away further from Reiki to bring in other light frequencies, because the world is changing and the world is aging. And so what I love about Reiki is that for many people, it is their safe start.
Yeah.
It gets their engine running.
Yeah.
And I would never want to take that from somebody. But if somebody came to me and said, look, I really want to learn how to do a healing on a person or on myself, how do you do it? I would then tell them everything I know, but it wouldn't be exclusively Reiki. I don't think I've ever met anybody exclusively Reiki. And I think that's why myself, I didn't continue on that attunement properly, because, well, one, they were tuning me and I was already attuned to it on some level, but also because as soon as I started running Reiki, a more galactic healing modality was coming through straight away. Which I found was getting me the results I wanted to get.
Which I think happens for many, actually. Yeah.
But that was a conversation that, you were privy to, you overheard in the car when I was on loudspeaker to David, going, talking 100 miles an hour to David, who's...
I know, it was so funny. You're on loudspeaker and I didn't get a word in edgewise, and I'm looking at David, shall I tell her that I'm listening? And at some point, I just thought, no, I won't tell her. Just let her talk.
That's when David and I talk, that tends to be how it is. It's like, done. Like, we're on a level. That's good.
Oh, he's like that, David. He's sort of, he's a bit like me. He's got a neon sign on his head that says, tell me your life story. And people just show up in our presence and they just start talking. It's just like, just start
I did a
downloading.
healing on David once, actually. I remember I did a healing on David. I'm sure he won't mind my sharing this. He asked me would I do I feng shuied his home, and he asked me would I do a healing. And I did. And I said to him, David, you don't need this. You do not need this. Why are you even asking me to do this? I said, what have you done energetically to not require this? And that was when he said he'd studied shamanism. I think it had been relatively recently or something. I'm not sure where that occurred in his story. And I just said to him, David, you heal yourself. I'm not even going to take your money now. Stop. You don't need healing. I think he just wanted a day spa. Should have sent him to the day spa instead.
I think it will, like for many people, when it's just that time out. Give yourself some time out to be nurtured, to be time out for me, because it like many people, oh God, that day in the car, honestly, we were driving to Canberra, so it was a few hours I was in the car. There were so many people ringing him, so many people, and telling them and him, all their problem, and so he's doing a lot, like he's doing a lot energetically with a lot of people, and I couldn't believe it. I said to him, "Is this normal? Is this like your normal day that the phone just never stops ringing?" And he goes, "Yeah." And I'm like, wow.
He's a successful businessman.
Yeah. So,
but he's keeping his energy. He's keeping his energy really clear. So I would advise people that, if they're looking for that sort of day spa experience, meditation. That is the way to tune in and really nurture and self-love, self-care on such a deeper level, because it's really your energy contained. It's not somebody else running their energy and other energy through you, doing it for you. It's you doing it for yourself. And so meditation would have been that will give you the greatest sense of self-love and
self-care
nurturing
and nurture.
care.
Absolutely. Oh, darling one, it's been so fascinating. Fascinating to hear your stories, fascinating and touching. And you're going to go into the science and art of Feng Shui more in the Higher Self Expo. Science is a bit of a loose term. When I first got the spec, I was like, science, I was thinking physics, but science comes in many forms. I think the science of consciousness is a science that we need to uphold, to expand, to accelerate exponentially in this world. And I think it needs to be taught in every school and every university, the science of consciousness. So we're kind of going there in the expo. We're going to talk about 3D sciences and 5D sciences.
Exciting.
And I suspect that Feng Shui would be kind of in that category of maybe a 4-5D science, really, the science of energy.
So part of the purpose or the mission that I'm here to deliver is to bring it from, I'm a bridge to bring from 3D to 5D.
Right.
So to help people to understand how to implement it into their environments. And you feel the light change as I'm telling you this?
Yeah, I can, yeah.
So that's I won't be alone in doing that. There will be others.
Oh, lots and lots. But it's been so beautiful. Thanks so much for sharing.
Oh, my pleasure.
Some of you today with us on the show.
Thank you.
It's been beautiful.
Yes, I'm sorry I made you cry.
No, don't be sorry. It was beautiful. I was just so touched by the story.
It's been a pleasure to spend time with you. And I look forward to working with you on your expo.
Oh, that was just so moving. I loved that, talking to Janeen. I didn't know much about Janeen, and she doesn't have a website, this was her very first podcast interview. She had actually never done anything like this before. So I had spoken to her a few times on the phone, on the internet and on email, and heard her, speaking to David in the car and so on and so forth. So I knew we had a great connection, but I didn't really know what to expect. I didn't really know anything about her, only that David said, oh, she's wonderful, she's amazing. And David was right. She is wonderful and amazing, absolutely wonderful and amazing. Really, I was profoundly moved by that. Her conversation. Look, I can imagine there's so much more to her story than we heard today. So much more. She worked for years, Microsoft, working for a certain software developer, which would have been interesting to go into because he's a character, he's a big player on the world stage at the moment. But she said she loved working for Microsoft. They treated their staff really well. And there's a lot more to Janeen than meets the eye. But yeah, she's focused in the Feng Shui. I don't even really know how to say it. But I found that was really interesting what she said about the Reiki masters leaving planet Earth, Terra Earth, to go and spread their love in another universe, another planet. That it has done its job, and we're sort of upgrading all the time to different frequencies. As the guides have shown me and many channelers have talked about, we've been, the energy of the universe has been bombarding this world with upgrades all the time for decades, maybe even over 100 years, but it's accelerating. It's getting more and more intense as we move in what we perceive as time and space. The energy upgrade of this planet is happening, which is dredging up all the dirt, which we're seeing in the in our mainstream media. We're seeing a lot more dirt being dredged up, a lot more corruption being exposed and disclosed. So it's exposing and disclosing a lot of the distortion in this world, but it's also exposing a lot of the consciousness technology that a lot of the light workers have been working with for years. And people like Janeen, who have been here for 40 odd years, completely awake and speaking to masters in spirit. And so this is all coming out, people's ET connections and their spirit connections and their psychic awareness. It's all coming out as the energies ramp up on this planet. So yeah, I suppose as we're shifting in frequencies, certain energies that we've been using are no longer viable as we move in frequencies. It just makes sense, really, doesn't it? And the frequencies that we're using today, maybe the galactic frequencies that are being used in energy healing today, will be upgraded and usurped by other frequencies as we move, as we evolve and move into a 5D reality. I suspect that the energy technology or the energy science will be vastly different to what we understand, even as psychics and healers today. It's exciting times, as I always say. It's very exciting. The future is an exciting place. the future is an exciting place. And, you know, I had a question from one of my clients about how we can access the good. I put a thing on my Facebook saying, we can't heal and uplift this world by focusing on what's wrong with it. Focus on what's good about it. You know, only love expands love. Only love increases love. Hate doesn't increase love. Only love increases love. Focus on the good. And somebody said, well, how do I do that when I'm looking out into a world that I don't agree with and I can't see anything good in it? We can focus on the good, even when the mainstream media is determined to show us, absolutely committed and determined to show us what's going wrong in this world. We can still accentuate the positive in all of it. We can focus on the good. We can focus on what we want to create instead of what is created. Esther Hicks says this, you know, repeatedly ad nauseum. Or when I say Esther Hicks, the stream of consciousness known as Abraham that flows through Esther Hicks and many others speaks about creation as not focusing on what is, because as you focus on what is, you just recreate it. Marina Jacobi says you reprint it, repattern it. As you focus on a frequency, you just keep repeating it. Focus on what you want to see in this world, and you bring that pattern, you print that energy into this reality as you put your powerful powers of attention, intention, attention, and focus on what you want to create in this world, not what is. So what is, you might not agree with, you might think it's corrupt, you might think it's wrong. Okay, so that's what is. What is a story of the past. It's what people have been focusing on in the past. You want to be a creator, a light weaver, you want to weave the energies of the universe into a new story, focus on what you want to see happening in this world, and don't get distracted with the current narrative or the current creation. Focus on a new creation. Focus on the possibilities. What is possible for you and everyone else? What's possible? Infinite amount of things are possible. Seth said, I read the books 30 years ago, over 30 years ago. Seth said, channeled information, Jane Roberts in the 60s. There are only two rules to this life. One, you create your own reality. And two, there are no limits. You get to create what you want in this world, in your life and in this world. And there are no limits to your powers of potential. Absolutely no limits. Okay, enough said for today. Chew on that for a while. Focus on what you want. The cats come to say hello. And yes, the Inner Sanctum, Garnet's coming in a couple of weeks. I'm getting some of my tribe to do some channeling next week. They were supposed to do it this week, but they both didn't turn up. It was Mother's Day. I forgot that it was Mother's Day in the States. It was Monday here in Australia. I do the Inner Sanctum on a Monday morning here in Sydney, which is a Sunday afternoon in the US, and early Monday morning in Singapore, very late, and Sunday night for Europe. Trying to find a time zone that fits with all the time zones. It's mid-morning in New Zealand. We've got people from all over the world there. But anyway, Mondays is the day that I've set on, early morning Monday morning here in Sydney. And we've got a couple of people in the Inner Sanctum that are going to do some channeling, practicing their channeling prowess, which is going to be interesting. And then Garnet's going to come and chat to us. And I'm online every week teaching as usual. And for the next few weeks up until the expo, I'm going to be chatting with speakers or potential speakers for the High Self Expo. Hopefully they'll all speak. We can fit them all in. We're busy asking people and to be speakers for the expo. Even if they don't speak at the expo, at least they'll be on my show. You can hear their stories. And fun times. And then I've been booking people for after the expo too. I'm getting very galactic after July. There just seems to be a lot of people that are in my space that are talking about a lot of galactic stuff. So I'm going to get really galactic after July. I was thinking about asking Zane to do a High Self Expo all about galactic consciousness and galactic wisdom. He might not do it. If he doesn't do it, I might do it. Anyway, There's lots to do, lots to play with in this world. Thanks again for watching and listening. And remember to please subscribe and like and share the shows and leave your comments. What did you think of Janeen's story? What did you think of Reiki leaving the planet? Maybe you've got something to say about that. Let me know what you think. Love you big time. Bye for now.